Caution: work in a ventilated area and wear a mask while airbrushing. The fumes are often toxic and may cause health hazards. Hello everyone, I'm I.R.O. Today I would like to demonstrate how to airbrush and prime your model with Mr. Hobby paints. But before we go in, I would like to do a small lecture to guide you through this demonstration. So, let the class begin. Lesson 1, Airbrush. This is an airbrush, and I'll be referring to this as a gun throughout this demonstration. This is the nozzle, where the paint blows out. This is the paint cup, where you pour in your paint mixture. And this is the trigger. You press the trigger to release the air flowing from the air compressor. As you pull the trigger, it pulls the needle inside the gun to let the air and paint blow out from the nozzle. Lesson 2, Mixing and Thinning Paints. You'll need several things in order to create a mixture that can be used for airbrushing. A small cup, preferably metal or glass material to hold the paints and liquids. Mr. Color leveling thinner to thin down Mr. Hobby lacquer paints. A paint you want to use, which I use Surface Primer Gray from Mr. Hobby for demonstration. A brush cleaner with lacquer thinner inside to clean your brush. A brush for mixing solutions and other uses. A pipette to pour in liquid solutions but not paints. And a clean paper towel. First, give the paint pot a good shake. Then pour the paint into the cup, using a brush to guide the paint will avoid making a mess. Using a pipette, we grab some liquid from the leveling thinner and pour the solution into the cup. Usually the ratio between thinner to paint is 1.5 to 1 or 2 to 1. In this case, I'm using my eye to measure the ratio like a pie chart. 1/3 of this plate is filled with paint, so I pour in 2/3 with the thinner. But overall, you want to get a milk-like consistency, which you'll see what I mean soon. We then use the brush to thoroughly mix the liquids. When we're done mixing, we use the brush cleaner to clean the brush and dry it off with a paper towel. To visualize what I mean by milk-like consistency, I poured the milk into another cup. You can see that the mixture is thin enough that when you lift the cup up, the paint still adheres to the surface, but not enough so you can see a little bit of the metal cup underneath. Much like how it's happening with the milk on the right. Overall, you want a thin mixture rather than a thick one. Lesson 3, Adjusting PSI on the air compressor. This is an air compressor. You can adjust the PSI by turning the valve. You can understand the PSI as how much air is blowing out from the compressor. To increase the PSI, you turn the valve to one direction depending on your product. To decrease, you release the air through your airbrush and adjust the valve to the opposite direction. Lesson 4, Cleaning your gun and cup. After you're done with airbrushing, you can pour the excess paint mixture back into the paint pot or pour it into the container for liquid waste. Wipe off the excess paint with a tissue. Then, using a pipette, we grab some liquid from an airbrush cleaner solution and pour the liquid into the paint cup. Using a brush, we scrub off any paint left in the cup. Hold the nozzle with your finger and pull the trigger to blow some air out through the paint cup to let the solution gurgle and clean inside the chamber. Then pour the waste into the metal cup so that we can use the solution to clean the metal cup later. Pour a few more airbrush cleaner into the paint cup and this time pull the trigger without holding onto the nozzle. By letting the solution blow out from the cup to the nozzle, we can clean inside the chamber of the gun. You can tell the chamber is clean when you don't see any color coming out, and now the gun is ready to accept new paint. The solution we poured into the metal cup is used to clean the cup, so we scrub off the paint using a brush. Then we pour the waste into the container. And with a tissue, we wipe off the cup and this cup is ready to be used to create another mixture. That was all for the lecture, and the lessons will be referenced throughout this demonstration. If you just wanted to know how to work with an airbrush, then you can end the video here. Thank you for watching. But if you'd like to see how I prime the parts, then stick around and we'll begin the demonstration. So without further ado, let's get to it. For today's demonstration, I'll be painting few parts from Gunpla which have been prepared for this demonstration. These parts are held by a clip attached to a stick. For parts that the clip cannot hold, I use blue tack to attach the parts to the clip. I also have a paint station prepared to hold the sticks to let the paint dry on the parts without touching anything. To prime the parts, I'll be using a surface primer from Mr. Hobby. This is my setup when I airbrush my primer. The gun uses 0.5 needle, which paints large areas with ease. The PSI on the air compressor is set to around 15 PSI. We prepared the paint mixture taught in lesson 2 and poured the mixture into the cup. Then we hold the nozzle tight with our finger. Press and pull the trigger to let the paint mix a little bit inside the paint cup. When everything is prepared, place the lid onto the paint cup to avoid spilling and also avoid the paint to dry inside. To spray the paint, press the trigger and pull it back to let the paint and air out through the nozzle. As you're painting, make sure to move your gun in constant motion to avoid pooling the paint in one area, but also gently pull the trigger to release enough paint. Don't worry if the paint didn't completely cover the parts. Even with an airbrush, you would want to apply them in 2 thin coats to get a nice finish. So once the paint coat is applied, we let the paint dry thoroughly before applying the second coat. As an example, here's what the first coat would look like. After letting the first coat dry thoroughly, we apply the second coat, and we let the paint dry thoroughly. After an hour, I removed the parts from the clippers, and this is what they look like. With airbrushing, it gave a very nice and smooth finish. What you saw in this demonstration can be applied to prime any models you have in your collection. However, be patient when you airbrush since it takes time for the paints to dry, and work in the ventilated area while wearing a mask to decrease the risk of health hazards. That is all for this demonstration. If you found this demonstration helpful, leave a like, and if you have any thoughts, comments, or feedback, leave them in the comment section below. This was I.R.O, and thank you for watching.